How did President Omar Al-Bashir escape arrest? Did the South African government assist him to leave undetected? What are the implications of the North Gauteng High Court order now that he is no longer in South Africa? And are perceptions that the IEC or the ICC is targeting African leaders baseless? What time is it? It's question time. Hello and welcome to the show. My name is Mpho Tsedu. Omar Hassan Ahmad Al-Bashir is the president of Sudan and the head of the National Congress Party. He came to power in 1989 when, as a brigadier in the Sudanese army, he led a group of officers in a military coup that ousted the democratically elected government of President, or rather Prime Minister Sadiq al-Mahdi, after he began negotiations with rebels in the south. Since then, he has been elected 3 times as president in elections that have been under scrutiny for corruption. It is today 2,295 days since international warrant of arrest was issued by the International Criminal Court. He stands accused of being the mastermind of the genocide in Darfur, where Sudanese forces and government-sponsored militias carried out a campaign of attacks against innocent civilians. On March 4, 2009, the ICC issued an arrest warrant against Bashir for 7 counts of crimes against humanity and war crimes. And then on 12 July 2010, the IEC issued an additional warrant adding 3 counts of genocide for the ethnic cleansing of the Fur, Masalit, and Zakhawa tribes. 3 members of his inner circle also face similar charges, with warrant of arrest being issued for Ahmad Muhammad Harun, Ali Muhammad Al-Abdul Rahman, and Abdel Rahim Muhammad Hussein. But when and how did he leave South Africa when the court had instructed that he should not leave without being arrested? A reminder that this is a live program, therefore you can call us, and there you've used the numbers to dial is 089-110-4210. And if you're calling outside the borders of South Africa, and particularly in Sudan, we would love to hear from you. The number to dial 00278911042110. Our Twitter handle is @QuestionTime24. We're now joined in studio by my guest, Dr. Stephen Friedman, who is a political analyst. But joining us from Sandton is SABC contributing editor Vuyo Mvoko, who is in Sandton, where the African Union Summit has been going on. I'm not so sure if, Vuyo, you can hear me.
There's no.
Okay, we seem to be having some little technical problems there, which we will resolve just now. But firstly, Dr. Friedman, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Paul.
Nobody remembers what was the agenda of the African Union.
No, they don't. They only remember this issue, of course, because it has, of course, overshadowed it. But I think a lot of what's been going on has been theatre, quite frankly. I mean, it's been obviously theatre, which is very dramatic, which is why it's gripped the headlines and why the public is taking an interest. But in the end, you know, the prospect of a head of state visiting an AU summit being arrested by the South African authorities was never realistic. It was never going to happen. It hasn't happened anywhere else in the world. And it's highly unlikely to happen here.
Okay. I think Vuyo can hear us. Vuyo, welcome to Question Time. I was just saying to Dr. Friedman here that it would appear nobody remembers what was the agenda, or rather what was on the agenda of the African Union Summit. All we know the summit for now is President Omar Al-Bashir. What was the reaction of delegates now that it has become clear the man has escaped arrest from South Africa? What are his colleagues saying?
Well, considering, of course, that the delegates mostly are members of, governments, it's bureaucrats, it's politicians. So they're bound to sort of gravitate towards one another, and they are, of course, quite angry, to put it mildly, at the fact that wherever they try to address other issues or speak about other issues that have everything to do with the agenda of this summit, they get asked about one question of President Bashir, what are you doing? Is he going to be arrested? What do you think should happen? That makes them very uncomfortable. In fact, today, lots of briefings were scheduled, and none of them have actually taken place, precisely because they can't deal with that particular issue, as they say, in the absence or at the expense of the core agenda of this summit. So it has put a spanner in the works. It has made them feel uncomfortable at the very least. But I think in certain instances, especially with regard to South Africa, embarrassed even.
But has the South African government said anything?
They haven't. They haven't. It's been a hot potato. No one wants to speak about it. Those who have had an opportunity, or who have found an opportunity to speak about it, have in fact been Sudanese. Who, a short while ago, about an hour ago or so, there was a media briefing by a couple of pressure groups, but also a representative from the government who felt that the issue should not have been there in the first instance, that it hijacked this conference, and they were trying to, they said it was putting the record straight, but it wasn't really, because it wasn't dealing with the core or some of the core issues that you see ordinary South Africans and other Africans talking about. Because people are saying that if the African Union has taken a position that says that the ICC is not doing what it was originally intended to do, if whether it's by design or that's simply how things have sort of happened, but the fact of the matter is that it has ended up being a kangaroo court, if you like, where only Africans are being tried. But if that is the argument, some of the questions that we as journalists were putting before those a particular group of people that dared to actually speak on this issue, it was questions like, remember though that this, to subscribe to ICC statutes is voluntary. So you cannot blame other people when you actually voluntarily decided that you wanted to be part of the system. Okay. And when you discovered, to your shock and horror, that this institution is no longer doing what you thought it was going to do, why didn't you opt out? Okay. And the explanation that you didn't expect what happened over the past couple of days to happen. What is leadership all about? It is about anticipating such situations. So you have failed us in all these respects, and you should actually account for your failures.
Okay, last one, Vuyo. Does South Africa emerge as a hero out of this summit there?
It is not going to emerge as a hero, in my view, whichever way one looks at it. Because, the prospects, as Professor Friedman was saying there, of a head of state who gets arrested attending, an AU summit in your country, that would have meant, in my view, the end of South Africa on the continent. It would have been a huge embarrassment. In fact, I I spoke last night to Obed Bapela, who heads the ANC's international desk, who was saying that was admitting that it is indeed a huge embarrassment. But perhaps he also hinted at something that all of us were suspecting all along, that this is an issue that was left too late to attend to. In fact, if you call what has been happening, or the damage control that has been happening over the past couple of days, damage control, because Obed Bapela did say that this matter actually did come before the ANC's international desk. It was debated, and by his own admission, there was no consensus over the issue. There was a group of people that felt that South Africa, like the rest of Africa, should get out of the ICC for all the arguments that the African Union and other people have actually put on the table. But he also said that there were other people who felt that the party of Mandela, the country of Mandela, cannot be seen to be abandoning the ICC and therefore leaving scores of Africans vulnerable without first putting an alternative on the table. So those were some of the arguments and debates that were going on within the ANC, but he does admit that failure to attend to it has in fact led to this embarrassment, where whichever way you look at it, South Africa is going to be embarrassed.
Vuyo Mvoko, thank you very much for joining us from Sandton there. Professor Friedman, let us take a quick break. But when we return, was there any other way out for South Africa? The number to dial 089-110-4210 or 002789-110-4210. This question time.
Information-hungry viewers stay with SABC News, as issues on the West are different from issues on the East or here in Johannesburg. So it is not surprising that people who follow the news know that there are two things for sure: that anything can happen, and SABC News will tell you when it does. Because we keep the nation fully informed. We are SABC News.
Welcome back. You're still watching Question Time. Our guest today is Stephen Friedman, who is a political analyst. And before we continue with our discussion, let us firstly have a look at this clip.
The International Criminal Court's warrant for the arrest of President Al-Bashir on charges of crimes against humanity and war crimes is a matter I take extremely seriously. The authority of the ICC must be respected, and its decision implemented.
That was Ban Ki-moon. A reminder that you can call us and air your views, and the number to dial 089-110-4210 or 002789-110-4210. Was there any other way out for South Africa?
No, well, there wasn't. Well, I mean, the only way out was to not host an AU summit. And people have to ask, well, should South Africa refuse to host AU summits? Yeah. And if South Africa refuses to host AU summits, what does that say about our relationship with the rest of the continent? Because once South Africa agreed to host the AU summit, the host country can't decide which heads of state come and which can't. We are a constitutional democracy. The host country can't stop NGOs going to court.
Yes.
It can't stop judges issuing rulings. So there's nothing here that the South African government could have stopped, provided that it decided to host the AU summit.
But what is best? Is it to let the men go and then remain with this barrage of attacks from NGOs and opportunistic political parties who are now going to come on, against the ANC government, the ANC itself, And, somebody was even saying, just prepare yourself for another commission.
Well, if I was an ANC strategist, I would say to myself, is anybody going to attack the ANC on this who wouldn't attack the ANC anyway? And the answer is no, because everybody who's attacking the ANC on this would have attacked the ANC whatever else it does. I would then weigh that against the reality that you are dealing with court judgments which are unimplementable. How do you prevent a foreign head of state leaving the country? You're basically declaring war if you do that. There's a lot of hypocrisy involved in all of this. The Americans impose sanctions on President Mugabe of Zimbabwe. They can't stop him going to the United Nations. The European Union imposes sanctions on him. They can't stop him going to the Vatican, which he has to get to through Italian airports. So, in other words, what we're dealing with here is that South Africa is being solemnly instructed to do something which no state on earth could do. There have been attempts by people who support the Palestinian cause to bring court actions in Europe to get Israeli prime ministers arrested. There's no way an Israeli prime minister is ever going to be arrested in Europe. So I think what we're really dealing with here is that those who dislike the government anyway are making a great deal of fuss about this. I don't think it's going to have terribly much effect internationally at all. The Americans aren't going to be cross with us because they refuse to have anything to do with the ICC in the first place. Africa is certainly not going to be cross with us. Africa would have been furious with us if we'd arrested Omar al-Bashir. And presumably, our partners in BRICS are not going to have a problem. Presumably, the European Union will get over it because if they can tolerate an America which refuses even to join the ICC, they can tolerate what South Africa does.
Agree. You're calling us from Mpumalanga.
Hello?
Yes?
Yeah, Mpho, I just want to ask the professor that he might just help us here quickly. We understand what he says, and it's good, but now the problem here is, what about the people that are the victims in this case, in the Al-Bashir case? What about those victims? Have they no rights? Who is going to defend those people other than the IEC? Because Africa can't do it. Thank you.
Okay. Indeed. There are 300,000 people who are said to have died during that war. What should the world say to the millions of displaced Sudanese?
Well, the first thing I think Agri needs to respond to Agri, which is, he's got a valid point. People die. Omar al-Bashir is not a nice person. He killed people. There's no doubt about that. Well, his government killed people, and he was in charge of the government. But the first thing I think Agri has to answer is, how many people's lives were saved by the International Criminal Court? Absolutely zero. The ICC has not saved a single Sudanese life. It has not saved a single African life. And that is simply the reality. He asks what should be done. I think what should be done is that the citizens of Africa and the citizens of the world should realize that if we rely on governments and the courts they set up to protect people's lives and people's rights, then people's lives and rights will never be protected. What we need is citizens' movements which are prepared to mobilize in support and force their governments to actually take action. Because the ICC at the moment is not a form of action by governments. It's an excuse for not taking action. The governments who signed the statute don't really believe in this, whether they're Western governments or African governments, etc. So in a sense, what we have here is a farce in which those lives that Agri is rightly worried about are not being protected. I think the only way they're going to be protected is by mobilization by African citizens.
John, you are in Cape Town or the Western Cape?
Yes, I just wanted to ask the professor there, who reports these cases to the ICC, and who are the critics of the ICC? And can an African court manage to take action at an African leader? So I don't think it's possible.
Okay. All right, thanks, John. How are cases reported?
No, what happens is people lay complaints, and I think what John is getting at, which is perfectly correct, is that the defenders of the court very often say, well, yes, it is only African leaders who get prosecuted at the moment because it's only Africans who lay complaints. Now, that was true perhaps up until a while ago, but it's no longer true because we have a very interesting situation now. Palestine has been admitted to the ICC. It's a full member, and it wants the ICC to take action against Israel because of rights violations in Gaza, etc. Now, we can see what happens, but given that the whole of Europe are members of the ICC, Canada, Australia, countries, they're not going to allow the ICC to prosecute the Israelis. So that argument that we used to hear, which is that, yes, of course, we only prosecute Africans because only Africans complain, that ceased to be the case a few months ago when Palestine joined the ICC.
Isaac, you are in the Northern Cape.
I'm good.
I'm doing well. Thanks for asking.
I'm good, sir. I just want to ask a question for why those people want to arrest him here in South Africa. There is no another way to find him in some other countries or his country. Is South Africa the only country that they can come and arrest him here? That was my question.
Okay.
Well, I think the answer to that question is that human rights NGOs, legal NGOs, etc., they're clearly not going to prosecute him. They're not going to arrest him in Sudan because he's the president. So what they will do is they will wait for an opportunity for him to visit a country where they can approach the courts and ask the courts to act. Presumably, if he arrived in some European country, they'd do the same thing. But he's not going to arrive in European countries because the African Union doesn't have summits there, etc. So in a sense, what happens is that activists use the fact that he's in another country to bring the case, which is what one would expect given the situation. But as I say, I mean, it tends to be all that tends to achieve. Yes, it might make a point, it might draw attention to the issue, but I think deep down the activists themselves know that the prospects of actually getting anybody who's an alleged perpetrator arrested are just about null.
Now, what is going to happen now?
Well, I think what is going to happen now is that, there will be a lot of hypocrisy about this. There will be a lot of people wringing their hands about this, and nothing will change. What should happen now is that this particular incident should remind us of how toothless and ineffective this whole international legal regime is, and to get us to face the real issue. I mean, it's a political issue. What is the AU's attitude to rights violations within the AU? Should the AU not have a statute which some other continents' bodies have, which says that if you are not democratically elected by your people and you don't respect the rights of your own citizens, then you can't be a member? I think it's a political issue which has to be thrashed out in the African continent. Whether people are going to be prepared to do that, I don't know. I don't think we're going to do it if we simply hide behind the smokescreen of saying, well, when is the ICC going to come and save us? Because the answer is never.
Jada, you are in Cape Town.
Paul, look, my belief is that ICC must actually get out of Africa, because for what I've seen happening is that they are only focusing to the African leaders, not necessarily internationally and across board. They are only focusing to African leaders only. So my belief is that Al-Bashir has done the right thing, and South Africa has done exactly the right thing, because should they have acted against Al-Bashir, they were actually going to embarrass us badly. Thank you.
But, Jada, before you leave, you're saying Al-Bashir did the right thing by doing what? By leaving before he was arrested?
By leaving before he was arrested. By leaving before he was arrested, because I do not agree that South Africa ought to arrest Al-Bashir. So, even South Africa, they were right by not arresting him. That is my belief.
Okay. Now, suppose indeed South Africa was right by not arresting him, then you would rather remain with this noise here at home.
Well, as I say, I mean, if you're just talking about the calculations the politicians make, you'd rather have the noise at home than get thrown out of the AU, or you'd rather have the noise at home and be become an object of hatred by another 40 heads of state around the continent. I mean, obviously, South Africa, in that situation, people would have said, they would have taken the attitude that Jada is taking. They would have said, you're sellouts, you're not really an African government, etc. Whatever you think of the opinion that Jada has just expressed, I mean, if you go out there, he's by no means alone. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of South Africans who have the same opinion as he does. And I think we need to ask why they have that opinion. And why, whether you agree with their opinion or not, it's a reflection of the fact that you have this huge hypocrisy going on. Which doesn't excuse anything Al-Bashir or anybody else has done. Yes. If African leaders kill Africans, then people want to take them to the ICC. If non-African leaders kill Africans, it's not a problem. And of course, if you kill Palestinians or people in the Middle East, nobody has a problem with that at all. So there's a lot of hypocrisy in the world system. And until we get to the stage, which I think is only going to happen if citizens around the world push for it, where we have a common system of justice in the world, where people accept that if you do X, whoever you are, you will get punished, then those views will persist.
Should South Africa remain a member of the ICC?
Well, I can't see the point, quite frankly. What does one want to remain a member for? I mean, certainly unless the ICC is prepared, is able... I mean, first of all, unless America joins the ICC, I mean, what is the point of an international court if the most powerful country in the world is not a member?
They'll join with veto powers, I guess.
Well, they might join with veto powers, but I suppose at least at the moment they're simply taking the view that they're not interested because they're not prepared. They say, Republican politicians in America say, we're not prepared to join a body which might arrest an American. Well, if they can take that attitude, why can't somebody take the attitude that they're not going to join a body which is going to arrest a Sudanese?
If you were President Jacob Zuma's advisor, what would you advise him to say?
Well, I mean, he's obviously in a difficult position in the sense that those debates for you we're talking about seriously. I mean, I don't think our government is entirely blameless in this thing because why are you a member of the ICC if it's such a pointless body, which it is? But I guess what Mr. Zuma will say or would be forced to say is, look, we accept the ICC because we are a member. On the other hand, we are a member of the African Union. If we host a summit of the African Union, we are subject to the rules of the African Union, and we didn't invite President Al-Bashir, the African Union did, and we respect the AU. That's what I think he'll say.
Prof, thanks. Thank you very much. That was question time for today. A big thank you to my guests for watching the show. Let's continue this discussion at question time 24. That's the Twitter handle, or you can follow me on Twitter at Mpho Tsedu. From me and the crew, have yourself a wonderful time. Goodbye.
Information-hungry viewers stay with SABC News, as issues on the West are different from issues on the East or here in Johannesburg. So it is not surprising that people who follow the news know that there are two things for sure: that anything can happen, and SABC News will tell you when it does. Because we keep the nation fully informed. We are SABC News.